Best we can. I just quit on her.
No, take it. I think you're right.
He told my wife, he said, if you guys are going to garage, just give me a call. I'll take it away. Alright.
Well, I haven't told my daughter yet.
Whatever it takes. Don't bother me.
She owns the other. She's willing to take mine.
At the restaurant. Last I saw was 13 nothing. I couldn't find the final. It was on TV, but then people wanted to change it to the end. But listen, we wrapped that up yesterday.
My daughter had litter maids.
I was down here. I got out when I got back home. That's when I started working. I was at the Salvation Army. I was volunteer. Jamie, before the garage door went down.
All right, we're going to begin in like 30 seconds. Please ensure your cell phones are on silent or vibrate. Council, ensure your microphones are on.
I got one with me.
If you had told me they were going to do that, I'd come up and watch it. Because I turned around and talked to you and you. That's a really good point. You have to go get your kids. I might need mine to read through.
Oh, yeah, you might. Okay, so we'll switch.
Okay.
I guess I don't need this.
No.
All right, let's do it, baby. Let's do it, 12.
I signed it.
Seem lower today, Mr. Griffin.
All right, good evening, everybody. Today is September 26, 2022. It is 6 p.m. Tonight we will be having a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. Before the legislative session, we will do our individual committee meetings. So first up is City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Property and Park Recreation meeting today, September 26th at 6 o'clock at Council Chambers. All members are present, including Mr. Heidig, Mrs. Fry, and myself as chair. Other members also noted, City Council, and guests. We have two new requests for legislation. The first one I'm going to pass forward to my co-chair, Mr. Heidig. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The chairman has relegated this to myself because part of this request does involve him, which he will have to abstain. Is a letter from Council at Large Thomas Hike requesting the authorization of the sale of listed properties to listed individuals for the sale prices of the assessed value as determined by the Summit County Auditor. Did everybody get a copy of that? Okay. Since I'll be fielding this for the chairman, are there any questions from the committee?
Did you talk to the departments that would be involved in this before putting forward the letter?
These particular properties there had been interest in, and given that there was a property initiative that I tried to pass on to the planning department. In fact, my last meeting was September 20th of last year, and there's been no action taken. The city-owned properties, for the assessed value of the properties is determined by the county auditor, pretty black and white. Now, this doesn't, if we pass this, mind you, this doesn't force anybody's hands. This authorizes the sale of these properties for the listed amounts.
Well, as far as I know, the 10th Street properties wanted to be retained by the city for future development. So therefore, do we want somebody from the city to weigh in on that?
Well, given that as well, the two 10th Street properties, and as a matter of fact, the 496 4th Street Northwest property, those three properties have been empty and vacant for quite some time. So whatever the hold strategy was for those, it's my belief that that time has elapsed.
Well, I didn't know
That is
there
of-
was
that is
a
of my,
time
that is
frame.
my, that is of my belief, so
Right. I don't
everybody's
think there's a
entitled
time
to.
period.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I'm not in favor of this without more backup from the administration and from other city departments that have a hand in how this is done.
Okay. Is there any comments from the body? Counselor?
These figures, are they in line with what the council voted to, per square foot or whatever it was we voted a few years ago that was the standard? Summit County's amounts, are they the same as what we voted?
Project impact, as I am understood from the law director, is a policy and not a law.
So how do these go along with that, besides that? I mean, I had someone call me today that wanted a lot that they applied for a few years ago, and the price was $5,000. And they said they wanted to offer $4,000, and we turned it down. The neighbor bought the lot. So how does this reflect to that amount that we have set? Now we're gonna have every person that wants a lot come in and say they want this if it's not that ratio that we applied, that we put out there.
To answer that question, I refer again that I was told by the law director that that policy is a policy and not an ordinance. That way, it is not actually something to be held on. So these prices are reflective of the assessed value by the county auditor.
I'll let these other people speak.
Counselor?
Yes, Mr. Heidig, I don't see anything in writing that these people are requesting this legislation. So I guess I can just put my name on the bottom and get a piece of property that I went to. I don't see anything from Terry Sylvester. I'm going to say B. Garrett. I'm going to say that's Brad Garrett that wants that. I don't see any requests. Did they send a letter to the planning, to the mayor, to the law director requesting to buy that? Because to me, if there's nothing from them saying they want to purchase this, then this doesn't mean anything, because I could put my name on there. I want to add my name on there. So do you have documentation that they're requesting and that they agree on that amount? Do you have documentation?
I do not.
Okay.
They have contacted me, not in writing, but verbally. And once again, all this does is authorize the sale for those prices.
Okay, did you, when they contact you, did you tell them that it doesn't go through, first of all, your committee, but it goes through the administration? That's not something that council, I can do the same thing. I could just say, well, this amount, I want this piece of property for this amount. This is not proper. This is not the way that it should be done. They need to request that, and they need to do it formally. And that has to be an agreement on the price of what Mrs. Colburn said about our policy and that. How many times have we turned people down? I've turned people down that want to buy a lot. I don't have anything to do with it. I'm city council, you're in my ward, but you need to call the administration, you need to call the planning to see what that, to see what that value is. I'm not in real estate. I'm not going to do that. So I just think that is poor business for us to even take this in consideration when we have nothing formal from 1, 2, 3, 4 people. I don't know who the second one is. 8 Properties LLC. I don't know who that is. Who is that?
That is Hala 8 Properties LLC.
I know it is, but
Who is it?
who is it? And
And Terry Sylvester, he knows how to go about doing this.
He did reach out to me as a councilman, and he did reach out to the administration, and they turned him down for the sale. So we've been sitting on these properties for 10 to 12 years. Now you said you don't have authority, but now it's time to change. You have that authority as a council members to sell these properties without the city administration.
No, we would have authority to be able to sell any property.
right.
You're pinpointing 5 properties. I'm
This
not
is-
going to sit there and say, yes, 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 and then we get it from, I don't know, Mr. Best. He says, I want to buy these properties.
That's a
We go,
start.
okay.
Let's
If
sell
you're
them.
going to do it, then you have to change legislation to say, if any of my constituents want to buy a piece of property, blah, blah, blah. This is not legislation. This is not legislation.
If I'm correct, any sale of city property does have to be authorized by the council, am I correct?
Authorize the sale of it in the proper proportion.
Correct, but we,
Just can't go and,
as a council are the final authorization for the administration to sell to sell any property, am I correct?
If the administration wants to sell those properties.
Correct.
I don't know, are these in land banks? Is this Summit County Land Bank? Is it
These are city-owned
privately
properties.
owned?
All
Is
city-owned
it
properties.
city?
But
Yeah,
what,
but you don't give us any information,
Just
and
ask
I don't
us.
even know.
Ask us,
My-
we'll tell you.
my
No,
point,
you bring that to me, I want to see that they agreed that they would pay this amount of money for this, and I want to know if they've gone to the administration with their request.
and the point to this is, being the assessed value, this does not force them to pay this money. This does not force the administration to sell these properties. This authorizes the administration to sell at these prices. Now, if these people who verbally agreed said, you know what, no, that's too much, then we don't have to sell. This gives the administration the option, the clearance to sell at these prices, which is a very fair value at the assessed value of the county. We personally are not selling these properties to them. We are giving the mayor or his designee the authority to do so if this passes. This is all this is giving the administration the authority to do it. As a matter of fact, the second piece of legislation, which I will defer back to the chairman when that comes up, is a letter from Stacy Carr in the planning department allowing the mayor to enter into contract to sell various city properties. Once again, we are authorizing the administration to be able to sell these properties. We're not telling the mayor, none of these say, mayor, sell these properties to these people at this price, and that's the final word.
So my question is, if that is the case, why are we even listing these people who had verbal agreements to purchase these? Like, what if I called you and said I wanted, I'm just asking, what if I
I'll just
called
add your
you
name to the list.
and said, well, not even that, like in general, why would we need this at all?
You want to give the neighbors, the residents, all these people's properties, the ones who are touching that property.
Sorry.
No, but I mean the names of the people who had interest in buying them. Why do we
It's-
even need?
And to that point, and to Councilor Angeloff's point, if somebody contacted you, wanted to buy a property, and you said, well, we'll just put them on the list, absolutely. Let's start selling some of these properties. Again, I put forth to the planning department a year ago an initiative to overhaul an outdated project impact, a residential property initiative, that my last meeting was on September 20th last year. It's in my email. There has been no action taken on it. It's time that we start selling properties and give the mayor the ability to do it. This doesn't say you will sell it. This authorizes him to sell it. All we're doing is giving the permission, which we would have to do for any city-owned property that we have. Counselor?
I wanted to ask you about Project Impact. It is my understanding that Project Impact was to take down the homes. I think that Project Impact is not these lots. The lots, after they were taken down, the lots went to Summit County Land Bank, and then they ended up back in our land bank. And all I'm saying is you are trying to change the way that we do business, where we have no legislation to back up this letter that just is coming out here and saying this person and that person want to buy this lot for that amount of money. We do have a process, and we would all the people that are complaining right now would be would look into it more seriously if you had followed the steps that have in the past been used in order to sell the properties.
It is, of my opinion, that process has failed us. That's why I'm at this point.
But we
That
don't,
is- that is
we
just
don't
my opinion.
operate on opinions.
Then why do we still have these properties? Why is the one on 4th Street still vacant after the old Sammy's Bar torn down, what, 20 years ago? Why is that corner still vacant? Why are those still vacant on 10th Street? What is the grand scheme of over 10 years of holding empty properties? The one on 4th Street with Terry Sylvester, what's the grand scheme of that? The lot's this big. The one on Harrington Avenue is so small, it says Lot 994 on the county auditor's site. What's the purpose of holding on to that? What's the plan here? My point is, these properties that we're just holding, some of them, just like Truson Farms, have been empty for over 10 years. We don't have a plan for it, and if we do, does anybody here know the plan? Because if not, let's give the mayor the ability to start selling some things.
But we,
Mayor, would you like to sell some properties? Would you like to get some of these off the books? Would you like some of our city workers to not have to maintain some of these properties that are unbuildable by our
These are all in
standards?
Ward 4 too, aren't they?
So,
Are these all in Ward 4?
I understand,
No,
I
Ward,
haven't seen the letter, but I understand.
Ward 5.
No,
No,
they're not in
they're
Ward
not.
5.
They're
Two
all
of them
in
in
Ward
Ward.
4.
If I may,
Oh,
Brad
they're
Garrett's
If I
in
may-
Ward.
the mayor has the floor. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I have not seen the letter, but I understand what you're saying, that this gives the mayor the authority to sell those lots. But it forces me to sell those lots to those people at that cost, right? The only person mentioned, again, I haven't seen the letter, but the only person mentioned, Mr. Garrett, I have met with him numerous times, and I know his plan of what he wants to do. We've acquired the lots on 10th Street because we have talked to the businesses that are over on Stuber Place, and we've talked to other interested parties in building, either expanding those businesses on Stuber Place or acquiring more land on 10th Street, because there's still a house kind of in the middle, and building a small manufacturing, light manufacturing, because that's what the building, because that's what the zoning is. So if that takes 10 years, if that takes a little longer, there's some cost in certain things that government does, and if we're holding on to it and keeping it maintained, but the end result is income taxes and property value increase based on new jobs after 10, 15 years, I'm okay with that. The other lots, I'd have to look at a map. I'm not familiar with them. I talked to Terry Sylvester several years ago, more about his neighbor and some feuding that was going on. Hallahay Properties, I'm not sure who that is. Councilman Jaber is listed here. So again, it goes back to authorizing the mayor to sell the properties, but it does force to sell the properties to these individuals at this cost.
The
Ward
10th
6.
The 10th Street are in Ward 6.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Main Street.
Mrs. Fry's.
Did I see another hand up in the gallery over there?
Yeah, I would just like to simply go on record and defend the planning department. Last September, you're correct, Councilman Heidick, you did come and speak to the planning department. Communication went absent from then on, and I reached out to you on several occasions. I believe it was because of the election, but I don't know why. Planning did not hear back. I wrote an email to you back in March asking to continue this communication. I did not receive a response back. Subsequent to that, planning met with Council President Greer and Councilwoman Thompson, and we went out, and there is a list of available properties, about 40 of them listed on the city planning website. All of those are available as we speak. So if you sign on to the planning website, all of those, this was after a conversation communicated between Council President and Councilwoman Thompson. And what else I'll mention too is that there is a codified ordinance adopted in 2017. I shared that at that meeting back in early June, I believe, with a stated price of 0.75, 75 cents per square foot of developable land, 15 cents per square foot of undevelopable land. So, setting the record straight, planning has been active here.
Mr. Heidick.
Chair?
Mr.
Hunt.
Yes, Mr. Hunt. And I think in January we had a meeting in your office, correct? And I came in and asked one-on-one meeting.
Yep.
Since I'm the chair of City Properties, how come you not reach out to me though?
I did include you on that email back in March.
Okay.
I have it right here in front of
So
me.
that was one email, but no calls, no council time in here. And you saw me, hey Sean, can we speak about this?
It was an open invite in my
Open
email.
invite.
Yep.
Okay. Just want to clarify that.
I can read that for the record if you'd like.
Okay, but since March, you did not try to reach out for me, right?
Subsequent to an incident here at a council meeting, no, I did not.
Okay, so you're still crying about that incident?
Chair,
I'd like to-
I'll call order on that
Call order
one.
on that. You can call order.
I will call order on this one.
Let me talk to you. Be quiet.
This is,
Yeah. Yeah.
Get back.
Yeah.
Okay.
get back to business.
we're going to stay on topic here. Counselor?
Thank you. Mr. Hunt, to your knowledge, are these parcels on that list of available properties?
So they're not in the disposition strategy as being available, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Director, if they're not in a disposition strategy to be available, what would be the reason?
So I can revisit the strategy. I welcome that. At any moment, I can share with individual council folks or the council as a whole. I believe it was August of 2021, I shared the rationale of how we would release properties, and that is the basis that we were moving off of. So.
My question with that, to follow up, is a couple of these are just small unbuildable side lots. So that's why my question would be, what would be the hold for them? And I know you don't have that in front of you right now, but that would be my question to
Yeah,
that.
I don't have the request or the requested amounts. I'm just commenting on our communication from planning with city council on this issue. So there are certain instances where you want to aggregate land, even if it's not developable. I shared that in my presentation back in August 2021, so that would be the reason why.
Okay. And Director, I will say that once January hit, I was removed from being the chair of city properties, so I did feel it would be in Councilor Jaber's best interest to take that over, which is why I never communicated back after that.
Sure, I'll mark that up as miscommunication, but that's, I think, falls on both parties.
Yes, but that's, just like I said, I tried to follow that he is now the chair. That was out of my pocket at that point. So, Mayor?
The property at 496 4th Street to Howell Properties, is that the vacant lot next to Councilman Jaber's gas station?
Correct.
Okay. So we've held on that. We've been talking for years about creating a retention pond there. There's storm sewers there. We've seen in the past that that intersection has flooded during bad downpours. So creating something, and if you're familiar with Elementary West, when they built Elementary West to the, this would be the north of that, it's kind of a retention pond that they do different activities with the kids, kind of learning. So we thought that, you know, if we could put a retention pond there, we've been working on this, and have the middle school kind of do some, kind of learn from that. So that's why we've been holding on to that lot. That was an old gas station back in the day, when Sam's was still there. It's clean, we had it cleaned years ago, but that's one reason for holding on to that. And, you know, for years, we've been talking about the possibility of a roundabout there, so we have to acquire property. If we already own that corner, there's less that we have to pay acquisition. So, 2 uses for that property.
So your 2 uses, a
Thank you, Mayor.
roundabout and a retention pond?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, sweet.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other comments,
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. President?
Mr. Hunt, would you be able to share those slides again with everybody? Just
Certainly.
it was a slide presentation that you presented in 2021.
Right.
Thank you.
That was emailed, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Previously, I had an email. I can share it again now.
Yep.
Can you include me with that too, or is that okay?
I'll include
I
everyone.
appreciate that, thank you. If that's okay. If not, just have Mrs. Carr send it.
Is there any other comments?
I'm always one.
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't.
Okay. Well, seeing none, and because Chairman Jaber had to resort to me, do I have a motion to call for this?
I have a question.
Oh,
Is this
yes,
gonna be
Counselor.
3 readings?
Yes, it was requested to be 3 readings and no emergency language. No more comments, so do I have a motion to call for this? No? I will make that motion. Do I have a second? Without a second, the motion does fail. And Counselor Jaber, as chairman, I will relinquish back to you for the next.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Oh,
I have a-
Mr. Mayor?
make a Comment?
Mhm.
If there's a question about a certain property that council receives a request from a resident or has a question upon that the city owns, please contact myself or Trevor, Mr. Hunt, and we can meet and discuss those, because there may not be plans in writing with cost estimates and things like that, but we always sit down and we spend quite a bit of time with the disposition of these properties. So if there's questions, someone's interested, let's talk. We want the best use for these properties, right? Yes, we do want to sell properties. We don't want to maintain properties, but we want to make sure that they're used in the highest and best purpose. Like you said, there's some properties out there that are unbuildable and don't even know why there's a parcel number to it, right? And then there's other ones that, let's look at the possibility. Is there going to be a roundabout there for the safety of the kids and the traffic? Or does a retention pond make more sense? So there's a story with the vast majority of these properties. And I'll tell you, there's some properties that we've looked up and we acquired back in the 40s, and we're not sure why we acquired them. So it takes a little more due diligence and diving into, is there an easement through there? Are there utilities in there? So every property has its story, right? So if there's a question, please contact myself and Mr. Hunt, and we can sit down and talk about that, okay? My door is always open.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
You're awesome. All right. Second request legislation, a letter from Stacy Carr requests legislation to allow the mayor to enter a contract to sell various city properties that have been identified for market rate residential development. See attached request, emergency warning requested. Any questions from the committee?
I do, Chair.
Mr. Heidick?
First question is to the council, did everybody get that?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody had those papers. Second question is there, I don't see Stacy, so Director, would you be able to answer? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, out of all these properties, all but one are on the south side. Is there a strategy there?
Those lots are buildable. I think we want new housing in the city, and we've been meeting with several housing developers here recently, so.
I just didn't know if there was a strategy of releasing by neighborhoods or by. It just seemed like a small flag that the bulk of these were on the south side.
I don't think there's any geographical intention there, other than the availability of land
Okay.
and knowing they're buildable lots.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Griffin. Since these are all in your neighborhood and your
Right.
ward, how do you feel about the flooding situation? Is this going to create more flooding if they want to build more homes, like he said?
Not on, that's not in the floodplain, on Joseph and up in George up in there.
George Street?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's not in the floodplain.
And how do you feel about reaching out to a neighbor first who owns a parcel next door before we sell it to a...
Well, I know for a fact that, because I've did it before, if the property borders someone's land, and it's already in the land bank, the land bank will sell it to each, if one neighbor doesn't want it, he can buy it all. And if both neighbors wants it, we can split it. But most of the times, those lots are really unbuildable. They're small and they just want to get rid of them. You want to extend your yard, make your yard bigger. That's all that is. And there's something else too that we haven't talked about. A lot of these lots might border a rental too, that's owned by a rental. A lot of these houses for rent. So a lot of these rental people, they won't even sign up for improvements on the street because they think about their taxes. So they're not gonna. They don't really care. So you have to get rid of it if it's buildable. It may not even be buildable.
So are you willing to reach out to neighbors first, if they're the landlord, the owner of the property, before you sell those properties?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Grover?
If these properties were in the land bank, the neighbors have already been
They've been
contacted long before they get to where we are today. That is step one when these properties get in, and the land bank contacts those people. So if they've made it to here, All of those steps you're asking him to perform have already been done. Honest.
Is there any way we can get proof of that, or letters sent to us, or emails, Mr. Mayor?
This is probably 5 years old, 6 years old.
There's still gotta be some kind of paperwork, or emails, or letters, certified
There
letters.
wasn't any paperwork for the other stuff.
Well, that's why we turned it down, so we're asking for this one. So we're back to that paperwork.
Well, you guys asked for them to put them up for sale, and now somebody has approached them to buy, to develop these streets. They're big enough that they're buildable, so they aren't gonna split them. So now, because we failed the other one, we're gonna fail this one.
No?
But these, if they've made it here, the neighbors have already been contacted.
If
Contacted.
I can
Am I
get, if I can
correct?
get proof of that.
I want proof.
Has anybody requested that, Mr.
So
Griffin?
no one has requested to buy these.
Oh, nobody has
Putting
requested?
them on the open market.
So this is just going on the open market.
Okay,
So there is no request for a buyer.
Correct.
okay. so
Thank you.
Thanks
But,
for clarifying that, Mr. Mayor.
yeah, so, but my point is still the same. If a neighbor wanted half of this, if there was a neighboring house, that's all done
Not necessarily.
earlier,
So our rules are if it's non-buildable,
then you'll
we
do
go
that.
to the adjoining
Okay.
neighbors. If one neighbor doesn't qualify or doesn't want it, then the other neighbor, if they can qualify and want it, they can get both, the whole lot, if it's unbuildable.
So if it's buildable, we don't do that process at all.
Correct. We prefer to have a new house on that buildable lot.
Thank you for that clarification.
And also, as Mr. Griffin pointed out, Councilman Griffin, sorry, George Street and Joseph are not in that floodplain.
No,
If it was on Stanley,
right.
that'd be a different story.
Right.
And then what's next one, Haven?
Haven,
Yep.
it'd be a different story there
Different
too.
story as well.
Yeah, Haven and George, it would be, yeah, floodplain.
On Stanley, the one gentleman, we own his property, that would not be for sale.
The one on the corner, Stanley and Bill.
Well, that corner.
Yeah, they won't, right, no,
I
that's,
forget the gentleman's name who moved away and passed away.
yeah, it's a floodplain,
Yeah.
right, yeah, definitely.
Any more questions for Friday?
Thank you, Chair. So these are buildable, and with this number, Director, are there more buildable ones when you said there's about 40 listed?
There are buildable ones listed on the website. We haven't had any takers on those yet, but we slowly want to release more, and maybe if there's a total sum that we can attract a developer with, then so be it. That would be our ultimate goal, to get a new house on some of these lots.
Would there be a reason that those were not included in this legislation request?
We are limited with we're working on 3 different studies right now, so we're slowly trying to pick things off. I mentioned this to Taylor and Councilman Greer during our June meeting, that we're methodically going about this, and we'll continue slowly going about this as well.
Thank you. And one more, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Heidick?
You said there's no interested parties in these at the moment?
I don't know about interested party, there's no formal request.
Okay. Then I have to ask, why is one reading and emergency wording requested for it? If there's not anybody seriously formally requesting it, what's the emergency, and what is the call for trying to pass it next week?
I would have to just make an assumption. If you want to do that, I will.
Ms. Carr requested it, so I won't hold anything you say against her there.
I assume, as Mr. Hunt said, we're all very busy with a lot of irons in the fire, and the sooner we can get something passed, we can start the process, and hopefully get these off of our plate and sold in a timely manner. I would have to assume that's it, instead of waiting. But that's my assumption.
Thank you. Chair.
Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Heidick and the council, that area, you mentioned all those lots seem like in a certain area. That area is in very bad need of development versus some of the other parts of the city. So to me, it would be a great thing for the city to concentrate with the Van Buren project going, to build that up and to fill those vacant lots lots with housing, since we're not gonna have rentals anymore, we gotta get, so single-family home ownership would be good for that, even if it's all on the same street, to me. I mean, you live there. It needs development, it needs brought up.
Oh, I'm not against the housing there. I was just curious. It just seemed like my only question was, are we doing it by neighborhood type thing?
I don't know.
That was my only, I wasn't concerned with that at all. I was trying to get a little more clarification on it.
And they've been vacant for years. They've been vacant for years.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, I was over there today, next door to one of them. And the lady wants to know, can she buy it? And I said, we're gonna build a house there, you know, but anyway.
But
That's question.
with you saying that, don't you think we should give the right to the resident next door, the first right, before we sell to some total stranger the building?
My take on that would be the land bank. If it went to the land bank, whatever was first in line. You know what I mean? If it's non-buildable, you know, yeah, sure, split it up. But a lot of people are not interested in it. They can't take care of what they got. So, you know, some of them, and if it's big enough to build,
I think we should get it in writing, the request to see the neighbors if they want to purchase it first, before we put it for sale to total strangers or a company. Because sometimes maybe the neighbor wants to build another house next door. We don't know that. Till we get that in writing. Mrs.
If they're
Colburn?
gonna build,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
But if they just want it for, if you go down there and you ask them, do you want this lot for building? And they sign, no, I want it for a playground. You're okay with that?
Yeah. Again, I want it all on paper. So I think we should hold off on this myself until we get more. Oh, Mr.
So if
Judge.
this passes city council and is approved, then there's a for sale sign in there.
Right.
And they can buy it then. Since there's no names attached to this, there's been no formal request. They still have the option if this passes.
Right.
Mr. Heidig, how do you feel? Oh, Mrs. Colburn? Angela?
Yes, has any of these neighbors contacted anybody from the administration, and the neighbors from these addresses were interested?
no.
Mr. Griffin, do you
Most of
know?
those people there
Or
are
rental?
widows that own some of them are in their 80s and 90s. And their family, their children take care of them and their lots and stuff, but I'm sure they're not gonna build anything.
So I'm just kind of like assuming, since these lots were empty for a number
A
of
number of years, yes,
that the people living there aren't interested in
Right,
those. I can
correct.
assume that?
correct.
Thank you.
Good.
Mr. Heidig?
Thank you, Chair. Counselor Angeloff, too, a couple of these are parcels. Some of these, if you look at the map, when you say, the neighbors, some of them are right next to each, empty lots in a row.
Right.
So they're not,
There's no
not,
neighbors.
There's no neighbors.
so some of these, there isn't a neighbor.
Right,
You know,
I know.
it's a blank, so.
Yeah, I know. It's not hard.
No, they're not neighbors.
So what's your opinion on this, Mr. Heidig?
Well, as I said in the last ordinance, I want to sell as many city properties as I can. So, you being the chair, you can entertain a vote to move it forward, or you can hold it based on any information you need. According to council rules, since it has been introduced, you have 60 days to act on it. But I am in favor of, anytime something comes in front of selling property, I'm in favor of selling any property we have, unless it's a flood zone,
Mr.
obviously.
Griffin, since your ward? Most of
Like the mayor said, it would be a for sale sign on it. So if you're interested in buy it, you raise your hand, check into it. If not,
And go through the proper.
and go through the proper
Right.
procedure, it's a done deal, you don't buy it. I mean,
All right. And Ms. Thompson, since you're in planning?
Yeah, that's my thought as well. I think, put them up for sale. Whoever's interested can
Perfect.
put a bid in, so.
Nice. This is good communication. Thank you for the answers. That being said, can I get a motion for this, please?
I'll make a motion to call for it.
Mr. Heidig,
I'll second it.
Mrs. Fry, and the bill, please.
Aye.
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 Passes. Awesome. All right, we have pending legislation now, presented by Mr. Jaber, myself, and Mr. Heidig. Appropriation of McCaffrey Park, ordinance appropriating $25,000 unappropriated item of the general fund to the parks maintenance capital budget, the general fund, refurbish a basketball court at McCaffrey Park and declaring emergency. Any remarks or questions on that? All right, open this up for miscellaneous discussion. Committee, council. All right, department heads. Mr. Patterson?
We'll get reimbursed through ODNR, whatever we spend on park, and it needs to be done by the end of the year. So,
Awesome. So we get reimbursed 100% on that? That's awesome. Good job on that. Thank you. Any other miscellaneous discussion? Mrs. Culver?
Just wondered how the closing early went yesterday. Did everybody get out before the bad storm?
No, they didn't, but Saturday was like a record-breaking day. I mean, I think everyone with technology and everything now have weather apps and saw that it was going to be bad on Sunday, and a lot of vendors actually sold out on Saturday. It actually started raining around noon instead of 2. It actually came down, so I would say it was a success. We still got months left. There's an email that went out. There's $5, and I think we're going to sell them at the farmers market tomorrow too.
Mr. Jaber?
Oh, yes, Ms. Angeloff?
Thank you. I just want to say that I never saw so many people on 3rd Street and West and on Saturday. It was unbelievable, and I believe that because they knew the store was coming in Sunday, everybody was there. I've gotten to know quite a few vendors, and one particular I stopped and talked, and she said she's been doing this for 20 plus years, and Saturday she had a record-breaking day on Saturday. And all the comments that I heard on Sunday before we opened in the morning when I was there walking, they said they did tremendous amount. They were so happy. Everybody was happy with that. I went hats off to Mr. Patterson, Tammy, Kara, Kate. They do. It's something like you start in January and you hit it in March, and you only have maybe a month that you can take a breath, and then you have to start looking for what you're going to do next year and the pricing and everything of that sort. So this is something that I think that it's been going on for 32 years. And I think we kind of perfected it. We still don't have the weather down perfect. Should be 85 sunny for those days, but we're still working on that. But being part of that for 32 years, I have been. It's something that is precious to me, and you have no idea what's done in the background. You know, all the preparation. And you have to prepare for the months. You have to prepare for the rain, sleet, hailstones. I mean, we've had everything in those years. So my hat's off to your department, Mr. Patterson, and that's I just absolutely love them like this. So
Thank you. As a staff, they all work hard on doing the best job.
Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. When you sit there, Councilor Angeloff, and talk record-breaking, Saturday I said, this is me stepping out of my council position, that was a record sales at my restaurant for a Mumfest in one day.
yes.
I know there was a issue, I'd heard some people were complaining a little about parking. I don't know anybody that had problems with parking, because from the second I opened the doors of the restaurant to the second I closed them, it didn't seem like anybody was put out, because I had every seat full. But you're going to have that with
Well, and
parking. But
it
again,
is.
when you say vendors broke records, they're not the only ones that did.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And when parking's an issue in my vocabulary, that's good. That's good. That's okay. You
Well,
know.
when it's nice like that, having shuttles from
Yes.
various parking lots, that helps
We
tremendously.
had a lot going on downtown. I mean, the whole place was just booming, and that is what I heard Sunday. I had several people call me and say, I love to see Barberton that way. I love all the people down there, everybody down there. You had your choice of what you wanted to do, choice to eat, where you're gonna go, music, and they said, you know, unfortunately, they said, we need more of those, you know, we need more of that, putting everybody together, because you couldn't find a place to park. And one of the parks members that's on the commission, we had worked, and we're called parking Nazis, you know, because we kind of take care of that whole area. And yes, I wish we had a parking deck. I wish we could put, you know, 5,000 more cars someplace. But everybody knows that has been coming down to Lake Ann that there is, you know, we have parking. Block 7 and part of West Park is all handicapped. So working with the police department, we keep them coming and going. So it's a pretty good setup that we have now. But parking being a problem, I think that's pretty doggone good. Thank you.
Yeah, I got something.
Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, I parked in a huge a huge pond. But one of the police officers, he took my keys and he waded through it and got the car out for us. And
He said, I'll go get your
he
car.
said, I'll go get your car for you.
Aw.
I didn't say that.
I know, the police officer. And he helped me out too.
Yes. Yes, the officers that we had that
Yeah.
worked on
Right.
3rd Street and West Park were phenomenal. They, several of them have been back, so they understand the routine, but boy, they had a routine going that really helped a lot. So my hat's off to the police department.
All right, anything else, miscellaneous discussion? All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Heidick,
And I will second it.
Mrs. Fry, and we are adjourned at 6:45. With that, I pass, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. The time is 6:45 PM. It is Monday, September 26, 2022. All members, I am bringing the Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting to order. All members of the committee are present, as well as all council members and guests as noted on my agenda sheet. Tonight, we have no requests for legislation. So, and we have no pending legislation. So does anyone have anything that they would like to discuss concerning public welfare and safety? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a question for the chief. With Mumfest this weekend, how was there any major medical emergencies or anything around the festivities?
Well, they named a first aid station, and I think they had a few walk-ups and some trips and falls, but that was about it. Not
Fantastic.
much really helped, I think.
I love it when you don't have to work hard. That means everything's going well.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for public? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin, and do I have a second?
That's me, yes.
Okay. Seconded by Ms. Coburn, and we are adjourned at 6:46 PM. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry.
No, I was thinking.
Next up is Rules, Marketing, and Development with Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development. I would like to call this meeting to order today. September 26th, we are meeting in council chambers. All members are present and all others noted. Tonight, we have no requests for legislation. But we do have, we have a pending resolution number 124-2022, which will be going 3 readings. It's titled Barberton Codified Ordinance, Chapter 206, Wards and Boundaries. A resolution acknowledging the decennial census survey for 2022. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion for rules or anything from the gallery, council here? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, second by Mr. Heidig. We are adjourned at 6:49. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up is City Utilities with Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call City Utilities to order. It's September 26, 2022. It is 6:48 p.m. All members of my committee are present. Myself as chair, Carol Fry and Erica Bailey. All other council members are also present, and others as noted on Carol's sheet. We have no request for legislation this evening. We have nothing pending. Is there any miscellaneous discussion for utilities? From the floor? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Fry?
I'll second that.
Okay, we are adjourned at 6:48 and a half.
I put that in my minutes, by the way. 6:48 and a half. Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Next up is Finance and Personnel with Mr. Heidig.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel, it is 6:49, Monday, September 26, 2022, in council chambers. The committee is present, which includes Councilors Coburn, Thompson, President Greer, and myself as chair. All others are noted on the sheets. Have a rare one where I have no requests for legislation. We have a few pending. First is Resolution 138, 2022, certifying property tax rates. Resolution 139, 2022, advance of local taxes. And Ordinance 141, 2022, appropriation McCafferty Park. Let's see. Are there any comments on any of those? Seeing none, is there any miscellaneous discussion for anything here? Really, nothing? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Have received some list of streets from council members for next year's street program. Again, we're going through the budget now for 23. It's a very fluid document at this point in time. But one of the first budgets, if you recall, I emailed, talking to our law director and finance director, I emailed council. We'll be coming to council to pass the street capital budget. Probably make that request in November. We won't have a list of streets, but we'll have a budget. And then the streets that we compile through our rating system, through city council input, through public input, and our street department input. We take that all into effect, create a list, and then we kind of take out streets that there could be other projects going on. So maybe there's more flood mitigation that has to happen on that street before we repave it, i.e. 14th Street. Or if there's a new development, we don't want to pave the street if we know concrete trucks are coming in and block trucks and things like that. But we're working on the budget, but if the council can give me a list of streets, that'd be great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is it a first come, first served situation?
Already hit by.
Just joking there.
Mr. Mayor, if that streets budget comes in November-ish, you said, when would that allow the bids to go out, if passed?
So I anticipate, it coming to council in November, passage in December, then we can start working on things right away. And then hopefully go out to bid in January, mid to late January. The budget will be passed, and that's all the finance director needs, approval for before we can start our process with our consultant.
Fantastic. Anyone else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:52.
Thank you, Mr. Haddock. That concludes our individual committee meetings for this evening. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we will come back and resume the regular legislative meeting.
Mr. Griffin.
I did that.
Always good to
I
see you,
signed the
Mr. Griffin.
line on it.
Always good to see you.
So tired.
Always good to see you guys.
What do you think?
Come on, Mr. Griffin. You know the game.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I talk to you.
Nothing.
Up the ear, Mr. Griffin. Come on now. Yeah, I know. You know it too. Yeah, you playing with the game though.
You babe.
You gotta play to play, huh? You the man, Mr. Griffin. So somebody's gotta step up, Mr. Griffin. You gotta step up one of these days. Change it.
Lori gave
You gotta
this.
change it, Mr. Griffin. People deserve people deserve better than that, Mr. Griffin.
He did, yeah.
I know, but the process wasn't there.
There's no process right now. People, the city of Barberton deserve this. Everybody's taking care of those properties for years and years and years. We need to get rid of these vacant lots.
There should be a time limit on it. Something.
You're saying it now, but you weren't saying it.
Well, I just thought.
I know.
Yeah, change it.
But
Ooh, that was a little too much. Wait, wrong paper. No, that's right. No, it's wrong paper. I think we got a discrepancy in our rules published. Online, it says the meeting time is at 7:30. But it's titled, the cover sheet says this. So I just got a cross-reference. I'll look that up today. It was brought up to me by somebody I was talking to. But I was looking, this is the hard copy we got. So I'm thinking there's a discrepancy we got to update the one online.
Oh, yeah, that one does.
But the one online has this cover sheet. So I don't know, maybe it was, I'll make sure it's in there. We'll make sure everything's wrong. Yeah, we'll make sure it's updated. But it was, I looked at the stuff inside and it had the right stuff.
Took my knee out. I know, Bradford. Around me, I took him over to play with the other friends.
Did you see the?
how you doing?
He said he wanted to do it, what? 2 times, 3 times?
What?
He said that was his goal.
What are you doing? I know.
And if he's out there dragging 5 people back there.
Tomorrow. No, but I got where I pitched it and I thought I got my elbow. No, I have skewers that are about this long. No, I go over here. Quite behaved. I used to get there.
They got a decent activity going on. They always have a team. It seems like this kind of part of
No, exactly. Yeah,
It was down to like 140 seconds, and we were up in Justice like 100 seconds. Did you not watch the game before? I was like, they're gonna run the clock. They're gonna do it like
It just came down.
Yeah.
They drop it.
And I was like, as soon as it hits you, when I was going over there, it's like hers.
That stadium, it's like everybody's sitting there. They were supposed to be there, just waiting.
What is going on? You guys doing? How's school day? Good?
See that the square foot more than last year.
Exactly, this week.
Man, that Kit Kat, that would have been good.
It's your own fault. I mean, you really have no one but yourself to blame there.
He snatched it.
Oh, I have no problem admitting it. It's on
I'm
video.
gonna clip the video.
Yeah, it wasn't on my agenda. And what, how much is this gonna put us up to for the second thing? And that's our portion. No, I say, when I say our portion, that would constitute our 40%.
What up, guys?
And how much did you just say there? Total?
You having a good day today?
4?
That's awesome. You guys do all your homework?
137? Well, there's more than
Do all
that.
your homework, brush your teeth, all that good stuff, okay?
So, what would this grand total
Yeah,
amount
love you guys. Be good.
like
Talk
that
to you
we
guys
have
soon.
stockpiled for sidewalks?
I'll push on, bring some candy. Make sure you guys do good. Listen to your mom, okay?
It's like 250.
Love you guys. Bye.
Okay, so 250. So 60% would be. So we've got to be over $500,000 in sidewalks we can redo. Given 60% from the owner side and the 40% from our side.
It's fine.
But theoretically, we could do in 2 years $500,000 in sidewalk repairs. Between the money up front, this up front, and that coming in, we could in 2 years do $500,000.
Oh.
Yeah, concrete ain't cheap.
Yeah, I know.
Stupid question, probably have another talk about. If we spend $500,000 on sidewalks, what's a distance?
She swiped it right off.
100 feet of sidewalk?
No, I had one, but he took the other one.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't take you.
I have a ton of them and I can't give it to her. Give me your kid.
I do, I just
What's
was
for dinner
saying.
tonight? What are you guys cooking? You good?
I made a crock pot of turkey, ground turkey chili yesterday.
Nice.
So I'm probably gonna eat that again.
Scoops is having a
I think she didn't put this on my
tasting
agenda.
on Sunday.
Can you say this
The
on
finance
record
one,
because I've already
it's a
entered
legislative
twice,
night, that's what-
and
because I
Taylor
have to-
entered me as well.
because
So
can't
I
go for
need to be
committee next week
chosen.
anyway.
I'll reach out to him.
Please enter me into it. I'm going to cry, and I don't get to be a taste tester.
If something comes during the legislative
Yeah.
and it's like a hurry, it's like, I can't do anything until next week anyway, so.
I saw
But a lot
that,
of
and
times
it's
she'll
so
leave
funny
that
because the
off
second
just
I
so
was
can
like, pick
get it
me,
out
Taylor's like,
committee
Erica.
Same night,
I'm like,
get it straight on the.
Please.
You'd be good. That's what you just eat all day.
I know. I'm very excited.
Well,
My
it'll
fingers
be-
are
it'll be-
crossed.
I'll make sure it's in next week. Oh, just get any like numbers or anything like that. Or
Make
just
it a point
something
to get a hold of you
they
then.
can
Yeah,
Digest there.
before I have to take it and dump it in Lake Anna.
You wouldn't do that.
Did you see? You didn't comment, and so I'm offended.
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
We're gonna begin in about 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. Look at him.
comment on everything else. You can't comment on
I
a picture.
apologize.
You can.
I apologize. I think it's not coming away.
Chiropractor, yep.
I'll put a big heart on it.
Please,
It
please.
can't come fast enough.
I can get you a good
Hey, can we still get a group picture yet or no? No?
Like a class photo?
Yeah,
Class
that'd be
of,
nice, yeah.
yeah.
Since COVID's done.
It's politics.
Is there a picture?
No.
No, there's not a picture. And there never
Oh.
was.
We should make a
I
nice
thought he was saying we haven't done a picture
Although,
yet.
I do think we should do individuals for like our bios online.
I also think there should be like a portrait of us behind our chairs.
No, nice
I think you're getting a little far. You're a little far.
That'd be nice, President.
Like-
Try to work that out. It'd be a nice picture for all of
I
us.
would do
Yeah, well,
myself.
Some people don't want to be on social media.
yeah, some,
Some good, well, some of y'all post it.
Yeah.
It'd be a
They
good
don't want
Christmas
their
card
faces
though.
on social media.
Oh,
it's politics, but I
picture.
definitely do individual.
No,
All
you
right,
It's not like the other side.
let's get started.
Christmas card, you know, pass out to other cities or surrounding cities, you know.
They have Christmas parties?
No, they should, you know, pass it to surrounding
You
cities.
can't. 'Cause
All right, this is a regular legislative meeting of Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, September 26, 2022. I call this meeting order at 7:04 PM. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by invocation by Mrs. Thompson. You good? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we come to you this evening asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion and make the best decisions possible for our community. Lord, bless our troops and our safety forces. Protect them as they protect us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, let's get back down.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Greer,
Present.
Mr. Heidick,
Here.
Mrs. Thompson,
Here.
Mrs. Daly,
Here.
Mrs. Angela,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mr. Jaber,
Here.
Mrs. Coburn,
Present.
Mrs. Frye. Here.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes of the special legislative meeting held on Wednesday, September 7th, 2022, as presented. Mr. Addick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the special legislative meeting from Wednesday, September 7th, 2022, as presented.
Thank you. And Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes from September 7th as presented.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the special legislative meeting held on Wednesday, September 7th, 2022, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, September 12th, 2022. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, September 12th, 2022.
Thank you. Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion to approve the minutes from Monday, September 12th, 2022.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, September 12th, 2022, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Approval of the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 12th, 2022. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the executive session from Monday, September 12th, 2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Heidick's motion to approve the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 12th, 2022.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to approve the minutes of the executive session held on Monday, September 12th, 2022, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are adopted. The finance report. Acceptance of the finance report, or acceptance of the finance department report for the month of August 2022 as presented. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the finance support report for August 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Mrs. Colbert?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion for acceptance.
Thank you. It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Colburn to accept the finance report for the month of August 2022 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The financial report is adopted. Petitions and claims.
We have none.
Matters requested.
They've all been dispersed.
Citizens addressing council.
There are none.
Thank you, Mrs. Angeloff. I know that's not your official job title, but
That's okay. I take it very seriously.
I know, and I appreciate it. First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Resolution number 138-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, Certifying Property Tax Rates. A resolution accepting the amounts and rates of property tax as determined by the Budget Commission of Summit County and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the Summit County Auditor for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Mr. Haddock?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Colburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Haddock and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Haddock?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Resolution 138, 2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt resolution number 138-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Resolution number 139-2022, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, Advance of Local Taxes. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton authorizing the advance of local taxes by the County Fiscal Office for the 2022 tax year payable in 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Mr. Haddock.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second that motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Haddock.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Resolution 139, 2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move to second the motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt resolution number 139-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey.
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries. Thank you.
Ordinance number 140-2022, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, Enter into Contract Timeline Construction, LLC. An ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into contract with Timeline Construction, LLC, the lowest and/or best bidder for the 2022 sidewalk replacement program in the amount of $223,560 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend. Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Ordinance 140-2022.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt ordinance number 140-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 141-2022 presented by Mr. Jaber and Mr. Heidick. Title, Appropriation McCafferty Park. An ordinance appropriating $25,000 from the unappropriated item of the general fund to the Parks Maintenance Capital Budget of the general fund to refurbish the basketball court at McCafferty Park and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Councilor Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the adoption of the ordinance number 141-2022.
Thank you. Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion for adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mr. Heidick to adopt ordinance number 141-2022. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
This ends the first readings.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Resolution number 124-2022 presented by Mr. Griffin. Title, Barberton Codified Ordinances, Chapter 206, Wards and Boundaries. A resolution acknowledging the decennial census survey results for 2022 provided by the United States Census Bureau and accepting the current ward boundaries as sufficient, and that no modification to Chapter 206 of the Barberton Codified Ordinances is required. This is the second reading. The first reading was on Monday, September 12, 2022, and the third and final reading will be on Monday, October 10th, 2022.
Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
We have none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. I have nothing. Communication from the body. Any council members? None? Anything from department heads? None? Communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank everyone who participated in this past weekend, the activities and festivities downtown here. A lot has been said already this evening, but downtown really came alive this weekend. You kind of saw the possible. Walk of Fame honoring John Mackovic, Betty Sutton, and General Charles Donnelly here in Barberton, followed by the Tuscany on Tusk event. Then Saturday, obviously, the annual festival, Mum Festival, and then several concerts downtown. Hearing that it was difficult to find parking is a great thing to hear, because everyone that complained to me somewhat complained about parking. Not one of them left. They just kind of circled around until they found
Drive
it.
around.
And so it shows the possible, right, that we can do here in town. So thank you. But these things can't happen without the dedicated staff or without volunteers. So thank you to everybody who made this a success. Change for Change will be this Friday at Hermosillo, I believe that's how you pronounce it, on 5th Street, benefiting the Suma Barberton Heart Walk program, 4:30 to 7. Cox Powell Herald Development is still moving forward, still working with the developer on an agreement. Everyone's very busy, so hopefully that continues to move forward. It is moving forward. Hopefully we can get something very soon. There were several recent articles in magazines and a Beacon Journal story on pickleball, the growing popularity here. So I believe it's also being taught in some school systems here in Ohio as well. So the growth of this sport for all ages, it's just tremendous how fast it's growing. And with the city creating new courts here in town, there's a lot of opportunity for whether it's the YMCA, the schools, the Parks and Rec Department, and or tournaments. Because there's a lot of tournaments throughout the Akron Green area here. So more to come on that front as well. Last week I had the privilege of spending a few days traveling with 11 other mayors in this area to Ontario, Canada on an economic development tour. And again, before anyone asks, or social media or anything, the city did not pay for any of the trip. I'm currently the president of the Mayors Association of Portage, Stark, and Summit County. And so we, with other mayors throughout Northeast Ohio, traveled to 9 different cities, meeting with the mayors and their administration, as well as local and regional economic development organizations. Also met with several universities and incubators and innovation centers. Very, very busy. So in the past, the Mayors Association has gone to India and China and Germany. But this was to go visit our neighbors up north, made a lot of sense. Canada's key to the economic infrastructure of this area, the amount of trade that goes through, even just being up in St. Catherine's Place, the St. Lawrence Seaway there, they still use a channel system to bring in the cargo ships, and that's what you see, the lock system along the canal. They still use that up there, and it's pretty cool to see it firsthand. Ohio exports $8 billion in goods to Canada annually, and Ohio itself imports over $14 billion in goods from Canada annually. So just very interesting to look at the logistics that in bringing in imports and exports. Looking at the 2 ports of entry up there, Fort Erie and Buffalo, and then also Windsor and Detroit. Very, very interesting looking at what they're doing with manufacturing and the partnerships they already have with universities in Northeast Ohio, with manufacturers in Northeast Ohio and in Barberton. How to strengthen those relationships, how to work on logistics, how to talk about expanding and growing business between the 2 countries, but also the 2 regions and Barberton, Ohio. So always amazed when we go on business trips what small little manufacturing shops we have in town that we pass by hundreds of times, and not knowing that what they're producing is a piece or a part that gets shipped over to another state or up to Canada or another part of the world, and how that fits into building an automobile or a plane or something. So very big in the automotive industry, chemicals, aerospace, plastics. So it was a great trip, very, very busy, 9 cities in a few short days. So continuing to work on those relationships. The next phase, I believe, is going to be bringing a contingency from Canada to Northeast Ohio and taking them around. But I'll keep you up to date on all that as well. Lastly, October is Manufacturing Month, and we always do a lot with the schools in the state of Ohio for Manufacturing Month. We will be bringing in the Director of Development of the state of Ohio, Lydia Mahalik, will come in and speak to the Mayors Association in the morning, talk to businesses here in town, we're setting this up, and then speak lastly to take a tour of the compact programs at the school. So kind of from a larger view, the Mayor's Association of 3 counties, down to the businesses here in Barberton, then finally with the schools and the kids and all the programs we're doing. So, more information as the weeks come by here. So, any questions for me? No? Kind of like your finance report, no questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. With nothing else on the agenda, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Ryder?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second, Mrs. Thompson?
I'll second that.
It was moved by Mr. Heidick and seconded by Mrs. Thompson that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? No opposed.
This is adjourned at 7:23 p.m.